Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's good to see all of you.
Good to see you.
I don't know why, but I'd like to talk about two divine actions, and really they're one divine action. And that is the divine action of opening the way and holding space. And of course, these are actually inseparable. This is the generation of sanctuary. A generation of sanctuary. But let's think about this. Let's think about Yohanan the Baptist. Because Yohanan the Baptist, of course, is called the opener of the way. And so Yohanan gets a vision of the coming of Mashiach, the kingdom of heaven. And receiving this vision, he sees how to wear that body of vision. He sees how to open the way, how to hold the space in which Mashiach might appear, in which Mashiach might come. So he engages this full force. It's quite the magical action. For Yohanan, it just is. For Yohanan, it already is. The Messiah has come and is coming. Let me tell you about Mashiach. And so, and here he is. And here's his movement. And he goes out by the sacred Jordan. And he holds this space. He generates this sanctuary into which individuals, people, souls may come and listen and hear and join with him in holding this space. Or not. This is an interesting part in the story of Yohanan. You'll notice he doesn't go into the villages, into the towns, into the city to preach. No, there he is out in the wilderness, creating this space, this sanctuary, holding this space, this sanctuary, being the sanctuary, and people come to him. So holding this space, in this action of opening the way, an influence is put out into the world. A divine presence is embodied, held, and naturally surrounds this prophet, this study. And it's lovely. Others come. People come to receive some teaching and some guidance. Students. And followers come, who can receive something of the light transmission, teaching, initiation, and more direct spiritual guidance, and participate in opening the way in holding the space for the coming of Mashiach, the kingdom of heaven. And then, of course, there are those who became disciples, something even more intimate, which is an interesting thing in itself. Because discipleship, that inmost point of follower, well, that usually means that there is a soul close to realization who has come to hold that space too and open the way to share in that very spiritual work and labor. So spiritual community builds up out there in the wilderness with a coming and going of many people who all of a sudden are learning to walk in Shekinah, in the divine presence, to recognize and realize that divine presence in them, and in so doing, surrounding them on all sides. Because as they hold that space inwardly, it is manifest outwardly. That's the way it works here. That's the way it works here. And when we say divine presence, Shekinah, do understand we're talking about the full array of divine attributes, the full array of divine actions, the Sephirah. To hold that divine presence is to hold all these different attributes, actions, powers, and holding them, to bring them here, so that the Spirit, Shekinah, can move within and through us and manifest as us in these different ways. Here's part of the virtue of wearing the body of vision. Holding this sacred space, sanctuary. We are the sacred space, sanctuary. You are. Wearing a body of vision means becoming that vision. Living the vision. See? And this is the holding. This is what is meant. And it's very important that we are aware of the power. For example, we were just speaking of primordial meditation, just being in the divine presence. And that is bedrock, that is foundation. Yes, this awareness of being one, in the one, as the one. And in this there is peace. So right there, we're in this meditation of peace, holding peace, being peace. Also in this is a very settled joy. And we are in the space of holding that joy, being that joy. And so now suddenly, holding this peace, holding this joy, opening our heart, having compassion, holding compassion around us. What energy? Peace, joy, love, compassion. And as we know from primordial meditation, there are various movements of prayer meditation that we can do, like giving and receiving, union with parts of, so on. We know there are sacred ceremonies that we can enact. We know there's multiplicity of intentions, that in this intention of holding the divine presence, there are all these different intentions that can be held that initiate divine actions, different blessings, different empowerments. And anything that's manifest in this world has an influence throughout the world. Thoughts are a powerful thing. Look, even science has discovered that if a person brings in a new idea, a new thought, it has a tendency to echo in different places with people they've never met. Other people coming up with the same grand insight, new inspiration. Here's opening the way. Here is holding space. Understanding, well, it's contagious. You do understand evil's contagious, right? Well, good's contagious too. That's why Yeshua likened the kingdom of heaven to a mustard seed. You have to understand, in the Middle East and ancient Palestine, what mustard meant. That was like the most incredible weed that you could have and try to uproot from the field. And just when you thought you got it out of your field, guess what you found next season? More of it. It was insidious, fast-growing, hard to get rid of. Sound contagious? So to speak? Oh, he said the kingdom of heaven too is contagious. So if negativity can be contagious, positivity can be contagious. And here is principle of opening way and holding space. And it's very important that we understand that, because it's not just about us as individuals. It's about all of us as humanity, all of us as sentient beings beyond humanity. The more we are aware of this, the more powerful holding an intention is. That's called faith. The deeper the faith, the deeper the awareness, the knowledge of this, the more powerful the force of will and desire, the more powerful the influence. How much more so if this is done in oneness? Not my will, but the will of the Eternal One, the will of the Almighty. This gets interesting. So we have that story of Yohanan, who begins to give us an example of opening the way and holding space. And then you see it progress with Yeshua, who holds this greater realization, this supernal realization, and sets the world ablaze with it, and passes it on to others, and others are holding it with him. So that there's this stream of light transmission, going on even to this very day. How interesting. Think of Elijah and Elisha. The Wonder Twins. The Wonder Twins. They're true Wonder Twins. All of the prophetic assembly gets destroyed. They come together, hold a space and light transmission, so on whatnot with one another. And before long, all of a sudden, prophetic assemblies are springing back. One gets a sense of a time of purging. Probably the old prophetic assemblies might have gotten a little corrupted by things in the unenlightened society and whatnot, and needed to be this transition. But in the midst of this transition, here were these two holding this very powerful space. And obviously, there are other faithful people around them who are willing to hold space, and the Eternal One in Yahweh as well. And so this could be done. And as it turned out, the succession of prophets continued. All the way into the coming of Mashiach. Isn't that lovely? In the midst of this, we can also note another story, or two other stories, just as a point of reference. So here's this holding space in which outwardly this radical and apparent success. But in the midst of opening the way and holding space, is the fruit ours? Is it about apparent success or no? Or is it lishma, for its own sake? Simply opening the way, holding the space, the fruit belonging to the Holy One, the victory belonging to God. So here's another story. It's a story of Abram, visited by the three angels in this radical manifestation of the divine presence, in which he moves from speaking with angels to a direct speaking with Shekinah, the Lord, this deep communion. And of course, in the communion, there has been this announcing of the birth of a child, the successor in lineage, the intent of a deliverance of Lot and his family with a future vision of someday Mashiach. That line of people being involved in the coming into being of Mashiach. And the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And of course, when he hears the destruction, being that tzaddik from Hesed that he was, from mercy, from loving kindness, he just needed to pray. And of course, in Hashem, he prays, Lord. So, but I hear of this movement of judgment. I hear of this movement of strict judgment. But, Lord, if there are 50 righteous, if there are 50 Tzaddikim between the two cities, would you spare it on account of them? Presence is awareness of, oh, yes, indeed. Well, Lord, if there were 40, yes. Yes, that would shift the balance. 30, Lord? Yes. 20. Yes, Abram. 10? Yes, Abram. If there were 10, that would shift the balance. And that would open the way, hold the space. Judgment would be mitigated. Of course, Abram has the wisdom to pause there. But let's not actually take this conversation in two-ness. Like, discussion with the glow-in-the-dark God is doing something outside of people in the matrix itself. But he's just aware of, oh no, if 10 could hold space here, something could be shifted, so on. But if not, he comes to an awareness of there are things that can be changed and things that cannot be changed. And he comes to an awareness of how? By this way opening, by this holding of space. And one of the things we know is that he then held a continuum of prayer, of meditation, of opening the way and holding space for the salvation of Sodom and Gomorrah. Hoping 9 others might join him. Well, in Holy One, there is an awareness of 10, right? Wouldn't his prayers count as 1? So there he is holding that space for Lot and his family, plus the peoples of Sodom and Gomorrah. But there were not 9 others to join him on that occasion. And as we know, there was the end of Sodom and Gomorrah. There was success in the deliverance of Lot and the preservation of this lineage from which Mashiach one day would come. Outwardly, apparently not so much able to change what was going on in the Sun and Land Society, so in the collective. But you see, it doesn't matter. But that the space is held and the way is open. Opportunity. Meaning, if there isn't an immediate response to opening the way and holding space, one does not stop. And in the middle, one does hold this wisdom of those things that, yes, as we join together, much can be shifted. When we cannot join together, there's much that cannot be shifted. That is the way it is. But here is this action of holding, kavana, conscious intention, holding the divine presence, generating a sanctuary, so that the Spirit of God and the powers of heaven can move within and through to accomplish any works of healing and redemption possible, whatever those are. And of course, the fruit is not ours. Successful, unsuccessful is none of our business. Only holding the space and opening the way. Only generating that holy sanctuary. You see it again in the story of Noah, don't you? Well, he sure did help a lot of sentient beings, animals. Not as many human beings, but it was a hard time. But there he was building that ark. Gathering in those sentient beings, those creatures. And yes, in the midst of the ark, enough of humanity to preserve the generations of humanity on earth. But, of course, in a lot of other ways, if one looked out from the ark in the midst of the flood, successful, unsuccessful, interesting. But this is accounted to Noah as great righteousness and great merit. What was done, and preserving the generations of humanity for the coming of Mashiach. Of course, in this conversation, we'd have to consider how Gnostics or how mystics use the word coming of Mashiach. You understand that we're not just talking about Jesus or Yeshua or Mary. We mean this anointing, this light transmission. This anointing with supernal light and the Holy Spirit. And holding this in the world. This is what we mean. And coming of Mashiach, yeah, with this hope for the coming of Mashiach, knowing that in some incarnation, all living spirits and souls are going to receive this anointing. Initiate an awakening process and return to be one. And we're always engaged in this awareness that Mashiach has come, Mashiach is coming, Mashiach is to come. And when we say second coming versus first coming, Yeshua, Mary, second coming, you, me, others. So here's a huge labor of spiritual communities. Certainly those in lineages of light transmission in any wisdom tradition that holds light transmission. This action of opening the way, holding the space, generating that sanctuary, and realizing in every movement that is generated, that rays out. Do understand, any moment of light transmission between two touches many in the world. Every time. That's kind of part of the secret of, followers and disciples. Yeah, we all get in these modes, and I certainly did as a boy with Elijah lots. I'm kind of like the baby bird, eat, feed me, that separate, thing in my belly and my realization. And but this is so funny. It gets really interesting in the continuum who is giving and who is receiving. All right. So suppose you had a really, really lofty grade Tzaddik walking the face of the earth, able to all these grades of light transmission, so on and so forth. But what if there's no one who was able to receive it? To form the circuit for the movement. Because to move that light without that would be pure sorcery. It would not be good. Would not do good. It'd be something else. You go around knocking people on the head for enlightenment. You just don't do that. No, there's actually a need of souls of higher grades that are actually able to swiftly receive light transmission and frequently. And various energetic movements and remember that teaching of Yeshua where two or more gathered, I am there. And where two or more agree. How about that teaching of Yeshua concerning that blind fellow when his disciples inquired, so Lord, this karma here of blindness, was that like from his previous incarnation or through his parents? Because he says it was this on him or them. And Yeshua says neither. But this one has come. So that God might be greatly glorified. So that this might be done. Why? Because it took a soul of a very lofty grade, perhaps even realized in a previous incarnation, to be immersed in such a kilipod. such a karma and have the strength of faith to receive such a radical healing. It took another able to hold that width. Who was giving to whom there? Gets a little obscure in that moment, do you see? That's like followers and disciples understanding just gradations of nearness. That's where that gets very interesting. Because you start talking about souls that enter as matrices, all of whom are sharing the same spiritual works and mission and facilitating it together. It's like that awareness of how interconnected Tekunim are. The Tekunim of one soul is usually great Tekunim interdependent with Tekunim of others, and vice versa. And that's how it happens. That's how the conditions are created for that fulfillment, that rectification and realization. It's really very interesting. In this, you'll understand salvation isn't personal. It is interpersonal. Gnostics believe in an interpersonal salvation. Interwoven with one another. Interconnected. In a very different idea of, wow, community. This idea of Zadik and community. Notice it's not really divisive there. It means and both. It's actually implying a oneness. A matrix of light and fire. A matrix of the Shekinah. A matrix of the powers of heaven. This is community. And yes, community opens the way. Community holds a sacred space, generating sanctuary for any wishing it. Generating blessings, empowerments for any wishing and able to receive. And actually holding such a theurgic intention in our own continuum of prayer and meditation is very important. Part of the generation of the Sacred Heart, the heart of love and compassion. And in the space of, for whomever can receive, meaning Lishma. Not dependent on results. But also not in the mindset of this is something over there, outside, but in the now, in oneself, in the moment. In this presence. I'll pause there and see how this might be starting.
This contemplation reminds me of something that's been on my heart this week. That when I was on retreat with some companions, we were sitting on a rock and looking over Lake Tahoe, and there was this point where heaven and earth meets, and you feel in the spaciousness how all duality seems to disappear. And it was fun, it being the pinnacle of the retreat, because it seems that a lot of what we're directed to do in continuum, in holding continuum, is holding this spacious awareness for others. And every time we overcome this dualism of inside and outside, or heaven and earth, seems to be what's coming to my mind anyways.
Absolutely. And in the midst of this non-dual awareness, where there's an awareness of one, of man, without contradiction, all abiding in oneness. Also the awareness of the purification of what is not good, not true, and the gathering in of what is good and true. Hence that release of negativity and the generation of what is positive. Yes? Oh. You know, there's a secret hidden in the Lord's Prayer. It's in the words, may your kingdom come, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Let's hear that in oneness for a moment. When you embody this divine presence, the kingdom has come. And there is a manifestation of the force of the will of God. Feel it? You're saying there's this point where heaven and earth meet. Isn't that about every point in space-time? You know, like everywhere. And how about us? You know, top of our head really does have a earth sky, earth heaven thing, doesn't it? Or hidden in our heart. So there's this awareness in the Lord's Prayer of this one's really in this prayer of may this become manifest as I am. May this become manifest as me. May I hold this and walk this in the world. May I bring this peace, this sovereignty. You?
It's when I think of this John the Baptist holding space, my mind was drawn to the notion of holding space in a continuum, such as righteous conduct, thought life in response to things, and just what can be said about holding space in terms of cleaving to continuum and trying to maintain, okay, but this is how I respond in righteousness. This kind of cleaving to, I don't know, a standard or a practices to, not as wanting a result, but as a kind of way of holding space and just whatever happens, happens.
Well, think of various ways of merging with Shekinah, the divine presence. Remembering Shekinah, the divine presence. For example, simply the intention and effort to engage in right thought, right speech, right action, with an intention of the well-being of others, along with your own, loving others, an awareness of connection, interconnection. This is a powerful holding of sacred space. This is a powerful holding of the presence, right there, in that simple practice, which we can continuously return to anytime we see our mindfulness and alertness veer, or where we may err for a moment. There's this. Or think of the practice of 3 roots. What if I'm actively engaging, which is connected to the practice we just mentioned, really. I'm actively engaging and remembering the Holy One is always with me, within me and surrounding me, and so others. Setting my mind on those things that are above. This bigger vision of Holy One in heaven, of the universe and the powers of the universe, where I'm in faith, I'm in hope, I'm in love, walking. Remember my transcendence, which has much to do with being unmoved by the changing surface conditions, apparent success, failure, so on. So that I can hold this Feeling?
Mhm.
Very similar to, how about arising from union with parts of? Really, that's about remembering. Oneness, isn't it?
Mhm.
I mean, it's always an underlying truth.
Mm.
We're just remembering and seeking to recognize and realize that. And walk in a certain way. Because there's a seal afterwards for walking in the world, which says one, wherever one is, surrounding, seeing the palace of the Partsiv, and divine beings, heavenly beings of the palace. Yeah?
Mhm.
Guess what's in the center? The Partsiv. Remembering that one has engaged in union with Partsiv, becoming Partsiv. Oh. And second, any sound, any vibration, pleasant or no. The voice of Partsiv, the word of Partsiv, hearing it in this way. And finally, any emotion, any thought, any daydream arising in the mind, all the radiant wisdom display of Partsiv. So these ways of integration, and all ways of expressing and opening of the way, and actually opening the way for others, because anytime we will engage these things, it does open the way for others, does make it easier for others, does put the influence there for others to be so inclined. And holding that space. All of these are holding that space, that divine presence, that sanctuary.
I feel like there's a power in holding it over time that somehow
Yes.
in this world with the downward backward pull, that the holding of it as a continuum has a certain transmitting power. I don't know if that makes sense.
Agree.
Okay.
Agree. Because first, certainly, we are gaining strength in holding this over time. There's a growing spiritual realization happening. There is a growing awareness of the oneness, and recognition and realization, and holding that presence of awareness. So that's one part. Also, there is such a thing as generating light power, generating merit. That is a very real energy to it. And of course, the more generation of light power merit, the more we have to give, right? It almost reminds you of a savings account, so to speak, generating. And then all of a sudden, the more charity you have to give, the more energy, influence you can put out into the world. And also, we will acknowledge how coming together as community and working together extends this too. The influence of this in the world. Naturally so. But in this awareness, why wouldn't I engage in this generation of the presence each and every day in a continuum? And in what we're speaking, are we speaking some more subtle spiritual mystery of remembering and keeping Shabbat? Not simply as a day in the way. You feeling me?
Yeah.
That Shabbat maybe has something to do with opening way and holding space? As a spiritual teaching. And we know there's a continuum to that can generate greater energy. So, yes, daily prayer, meditation, and this remembrance from one to another, keeping the continuum. Yeah. Even the word continuum, in some aspects of its meaning in our vocabulary, suggests this sanctuary, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Yes, it does.
I just got this feeling of how, a rose doesn't reveal its petals till it opens. So there's like this closed hardness around it. And then one creates the conditions for the rose to open. And it opens naturally at the petals. And the fragrance is released. So it can attract, hummingbirds and
Yeah, pollinators.
Yeah. So I can see this beautiful mystery of Guadalupe in just this awareness of how when one naturally opens and creates space, this natural flower
Yes.
essence happens.
Well, it is interesting. In Guadalupe, while there's a poignant understanding of the Dark Age, at the same time, there's a proclamation of an age, a time of bursting forth into bloom. Also, the sign that is given by Guadalupe to her prophet and the bishop is roses that don't even belong in Mexico, like that, bursting forth into bloom in December, in the midst of a dark time, this bursting forth into bloom. So, my point being, is holding space co-creating the conditions for the blooming of souls? And isn't that in the message of Guadalupe? Up here, hold this space with me. Hold this space in me. Hold this space as me. And you will see an age of bursting forth into bloom around you. Even in the midst of a dark age, a very difficult time. But what time it is really isn't our business, is it? Just this, holding the space, co-creating the conditions for the blooming of souls, for these movements of the Holy Spirit and these powers of heaven, this light. So yes, this principle of a rose and its blooming, very much part of this. But of course, we do consciously hold the intention of the bloom. And doing what we can to nourish and nurture towards that. So there is this.
There's this holding the space for this entire movement. But it seems that also part of this is those who are brought into our, the Shekinah brings to us to interact with.
Mm-hmm.
I've had an experience of somebody being in really despair, not believing anything's going to happen, and sharing with them and being willing to hold the faith for them, because they couldn't hold it right at that time.
Yes.
And so every time we talk, that's okay, I'm holding the faith for you, and it does resolve.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like even on our own individual, this is what happens day to day in life, being able to back away and not get caught up.
Oh yes.
And we are doing the same thing and helping others draw out what is in them.
But this is precisely what we're talking about.
Okay, cool.
When we say spiritual community and whatnot, and these spiritual works, realize we're talking about your life.
Yes.
You're a member of the body of Mashiach, spiritual community, anointed community, right? Then that means all engagements that you have in Dreamtime or this world are part of community. So in our mind, there's no two-ness going on here.
Right.
This includes, and this is for everybody. This isn't just for the spiritual or the faithful. This is for everybody. You know, that's really not an issue to us in this regard. So, oh yeah. You know, who's the right thought, right speech, right action for?
Right. The world.
How's the abiding in faith, hope, and love? Well, these moments. Could be a stranger at a diner you're working with that day. Kind of goes to we are our brother and sister's keeper.
Yes.
And every person we meet inwardly is a sibling.
There's something about those interactions, because there's an awareness that what will happen. That's not our business.
No, it's not.
But it reinforces this awareness that we are all connected some level.
Yeah, you know, and I have to admit, it has just been this huge, very, very powerful contemplation in my own experience of prayer meditation recently, of the necessity of the awareness of what is my business and what is not.
Right.
What can be done and what cannot be done. What can be changed, what cannot be changed. How very important that is. And what is my business?
Yes.
And of course, it does come back to this conversation. Well, my business is to manifest the holy sanctuary in all these different conditions, to offer whatever helps can be offered, where it goes, holding this presence, this light presence, this light power. This isn't the one. It's not my business. Just this is. And in lots of other measures, watching up, well, actually, you know, this isn't my business. This is so-and-so's business. My business is holding this vision for brother or sister.
Yes.
This is going to work out. When it works out, that's not my business. That's Holy One's business.
Right.
And that one's business. and so there is something about that wisdom of yeah, what is my business, really, and not
Right.
my business.
And then the story of Abraham, and the negotiations of how many holy ones would save the cities. It sounds like the same thing. Okay. Okay, now it's not my business. I am to hold it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Here's a good one for you. Absolutely, I can hold great hope of the continuation of this range of light transmission in the next generation, except one thing. In the end, that's not my business. The next generation. This one is. And then it will be other people's business
Right.
at that time. So, which is the right focus, though, for those conditions of the bursting forth into bloom.
Yes.
Yes, here, my business. I'm sure were Elijah here, he would say much the same thing. If one asked advice on this or that matter, it'd be like, oh, this is no longer any of my business. Then
Yeah.
my time is gone. You now go. So interesting, you know. Contemplation, I believe, is very useful to holding sacred space well. Which still goes back to apparent failure, apparent success, so on. It's not about the results, it's this.
And it's a relaxation.
Yeah, we do get a little too big for our britches once in a while, You know, every once in a while, you kind of need to say to the ego, sit, boo-boo. Down. Chill. Stay. Just, you know, back in place again.
Might we interpret the story of Torah and moving into Gospels and then moving forward as a dynamic story of opening and holding space in different
Absolutely. Isn't it that this divine action constantly,
Yeah.
which then becomes our divine action in our generation, for us to hold, as others have held, and open the way. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, every generation of the faithful and the spiritual are in this action for the next generation. And then the next generation must pick it up and engage.
Oh, okay. And I don't know what can be said now, but it seems to be giving a connection to what the term generations of Adam might be speaking of.
That is a lovely word to contemplate. Also, remembering a word that comes up in gospel of an order of regeneration. So there's the generations of Adam, and there's this order of regeneration in Mashiach. That sounds like a different discourse, though, or another discourse. But I was just hinting at it in the Sixth Gate writing in Generations of Adam. Well, yesterday. Yeah, yesterday. Well, now that I plugged that writing, maybe this is a good point to seal our discourse. Until another time, may you be conscious of the divine presence manifest before you, within you, surrounding you, as you. My love to you. May the peace and grace of our Yahweh Adonai go with you. May you go in the spirit of Yahweh. Zikor Shalom.
Shalom.
So